I had just one day in Porto, and I wanted to find out if this city is actually worth visiting or if it just looks better online than it feels in real life. Because when you look at any Porto travel guide, everything seems perfect: the colorful buildings, the river views, the historic streets, and the amazing viewpoints. But the reality can feel very different once you're actually there. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I spent my time, what stood out to me the most, and what it was really like to travel to Porto for a full day. This video is part of a bigger Portugal travel experience for me, but in this one, I'm focusing fully on Porto and showing you the route I personally followed, what I spent, and how you could do something very similar on a lower budget. I also wanted this Porto vlog to be genuinely useful, so instead of just showing pretty shots, I'm sharing the places that felt worth the time, the food that stood out, and the practical details I would have wanted to know myself before going. So if you've been wondering what to do in Porto, this will give you a full day plan based on my real experience. We landed very early in the morning at Porto Airport, and since this was part of a larger trip, we picked up a rental SUV that we had already booked in advance for Porto pickup and Lisbon drop-off, which cost us €312 for 5 days plus a €500 deposit. From the airport, it took us about 15 minutes to drive to our hotel, Pestana Palacio do Freixo, where we paid €330 per night for 3 people. And the hotel itself felt very special because it's set inside a historic palace just outside the center. But if you're planning your own trip, you absolutely do not need to spend this much, because you can find shared hostel beds for around €15 per night, or private rooms with metro access for around €35. And if you're not renting a car, one of the best Porto travel tips is to simply take the metro from the airport, because it only costs around €2 to €3 and makes getting into the city very easy from the start. Later that morning, we headed into the center to start exploring properly, and instead of dealing with parking, we left the car at the hotel and took an Uber into town for around €4 to €5. We started on Rua dos Mercadores, one of the oldest streets in the city, and from there walked toward the Ribeira District, where Porto made a very strong first impression on me. This part of Porto City felt lively, colorful, and full of character, with riverside restaurants, cafes, boutique hotels, fishermen, small tour stands, and those classic facades lining the Douro River. What I liked most right away was that it didn't feel too polished or overly staged for tourists. It felt busy, slightly chaotic, and very real, and that immediately made filming this Porto Portugal travel vlog feel much more authentic. From Ribeira, we slowly made our way uphill through the older part of the city, and this ended up being one of my favorite parts of the entire day, because it felt like the perfect mix of major landmarks and smaller details you only notice when you're actually exploring on foot. As we climbed through Porto's steep streets, we passed the historic Church of St. Francis, saw the nostalgic red tram, and kept getting beautiful glimpses back toward the river. We also passed the smaller parish church of St. Nicholas, Jardim do Infante Dom Henrique, and Palacio da Bolsa before reaching Mercado Ferreira Borges, where we explored the indoor river market filled with handmade goods and local artists. From there, we climbed a series of narrow streets and steep stairs until we reached Miradouro da Vitória, one of the best viewpoints in the city, where the rooftops, river, and bridges all start to come together. If you're looking for things to do in Porto, this whole stretch feels even more rewarding once you pass Fonte da Porta do Olival, Torre dos Clérigos, and the historic Casa Oriental, famous for its traditional canned sardines nearby too. From there, we crossed between the yellow trams and reached Livraria Lello, which had a long line outside and is easily one of the biggest Porto highlights in the city. Since we only had limited time, we bought the €15 gold or exclusive ticket in advance so we could get in much faster. And honestly, that was the right move because it saved time and made the visit feel much smoother. Once inside, it absolutely felt worth seeing because the architecture, staircase, and design make it one of the most unique interiors in Porto. Just a short walk from there, we reached Praça de Gomes Teixeira, where you'll find the University of Porto, Fonte dos Leões, and the Porto City sign. And this square, also stands out because of Igreja do Carmo and Igreja dos Carmelitas, two churches that appear to be one building but are actually separated by the tiny Casa Escondida, a hidden house only about 1 meter wide. This is the kind of stop that shows why any Porto Portugal travel guide usually puts this area so high on the list. After leaving that area, we continued down Rua dos Clérigos, passing more local Portuguese shops and gradually making our way toward Praça da Liberdade, which felt like a completely different side of the city. The first thing that stood out here was the Monumento a Dom Pedro IV in the middle of the square, followed by the impressive Banco de Portugal building just to the side. And from there, the space opened up into one of the grandest areas in Porto. We kept walking past statues, groups of tourists, and the city's wider central avenues until we reached City Hall, where we stopped for a moment in Praça General Humberto Delgado. Then we made our way through side streets toward Mercado Bolhão, which felt like one of the most authentic and local parts of the city, full of Porto's everyday rhythm, before heading up to the Chapel of Souls, one of the city's most iconic landmarks, covered in blue azulejo tiles. After a quick look inside, we continued down Rua de Santa Catarina, and if you only have limited time and want to cover the main things to do in Porto, Portugal, this entire section works really well because it mixes major architecture, local life, and central city energy in a very walkable way. This is where we stopped for lunch at Majestic Café, one of the most famous food stops in the city, and it definitely felt more like an experience than just a quick meal. We paid around 25 euros per person, which is clearly on the expensive side, but the atmosphere, interior, and history make it one of those places you probably try at least once if you're visiting. At the same time, if you're looking for more budget-friendly Porto food, there are plenty of cafes and practical lunch spots in the same area where you can eat for around 7 to 8 euros, so Porto really gives you both options. After lunch, we spent some time walking along the street, browsing souvenir shops, and continuing through the area until we reached Church of St. Ildefonso, another important landmark in the city, with its beautiful azulejo-covered exterior that instantly stands out. At this point, we decided to speed things up and take a tuk-tuk tour for 1.5 hours, which cost us 150 euros total, or around 50 euros per person. And this ended up being one of the clearest examples of paying more for convenience rather than necessity. Since we had already done a lot on foot, the tuk-tuk helped us cover the parts of the city we still wanted to see more efficiently, especially areas we had either missed or would have taken much longer to reach by walking. During this faster moving part of the day, we stopped briefly at Rua das Flores, then visited São Bento train station, where we went inside and took photos of the famous azulejo-covered walls, and also saw Igreja de Santo Antonio dos Congregados directly across from the station. From there, we continued up to Porto Cathedral, where the views over the rooftops were absolutely incredible, and from that area, we could also appreciate the Episcopal Palace and see St. Lawrence Church from above. This was also the moment where filming the Porto travel vlog became much easier, because the tuk-tuk helped us fit in more without losing too much time. Once we crossed over, the city started to feel completely different because from the Gaia side everything opens up from a whole new angle. Along the way, we could see both Ponte de São João and the Maria Pia Bridge, the earlier bridge design associated with Gustave Eiffel, before continuing toward Luisa Bridge. When we reached the viewing terrace there, we had one of the best perspectives of Ribeira, the river, and the boats moving through it, and we even watched people doing water sports below. We took a symbolic walk across the bridge and then continued up on the Gaia side, watching the cable cars move above us while passing colorful homes and cyclists on the way toward Miradouro da Serra do Pilar. This was one of those moments that reminded me, Porto is not just about checking off landmarks, it's also about enjoying the views and atmosphere in between them. After the driver dropped us off at the Gaia waterfront, we kept exploring on foot, and this stretch felt like a perfect transition from sightseeing to slowing down and actually taking in the atmosphere. Along the river, the rows of cafes and restaurants already made it clear that this area gets very crowded later in the day, and the market stalls and street vendors made the whole promenade feel even more lively, We passed a small historic church, wine lodges, gondolas, and more classic Ribeira views across the river, all of which made this side of the city feel distinct from the old town atmosphere we had started with earlier. At the end of this walk, we went inside Mercado Beira-Rio for a quick look, and it felt like another strong stop for anyone interested in local flavors and wine. After that, we took an Uber back to the hotel for around 6 to 7 euros, so we could rest a little before returning later in the evening. In the evening, we came back to the riverside because the plan was to have dinner there, and by then the atmosphere had changed completely from what we had experienced earlier in the day. The area was much more crowded, restaurants had long lines outside, and the whole waterfront felt more intense, busier, and much more social. We ended up waiting at least 30 minutes for a table, but while we waited I walked around the area a bit more, checking out the bars, the live atmosphere, and the final views of the river as the day faded into night. The restaurant itself offered a wide range of options, from seafood and meat dishes to pasta and vegetable plates, and we paid around 40 euros per person for dinner. It definitely wasn't the cheapest meal of the day, but sitting there with the river, the city lights, and the skyline in the background felt like the perfect way to end the day. Now let's talk about what this full day actually cost me, because this is one of the most important parts of any Porto travel experience. For accommodation, we paid 330 euros per night for 3 people at Pestana Palacio do Freixo, which comes to roughly 110 euros per person. Lunch at Majestic Café cost us around 25 euros per person. Dinner by the riverside was around 40 euros per person, and Uber rides throughout the day added up to about 10 euros in total, before the final 6 to 7 euro ride back to the hotel. We also paid 15 euros for the fast-track ticket at Lello and the 5-hour tuk-tuk tour came to 150 euros total, or about 50 euros per person. So when everything is added together, my total cost for the day came to roughly 200 to 250 euros per person, which is clearly not the cheapest way to do the city. But it does give a very realistic picture of what a more comfortable experience-focused day looks like. The good news is that you absolutely do not need to spend that much to enjoy the city, and this is where it becomes even more appealing. If you want a more budget-friendly trip, you could stay in a shared hostel bed for around 15 euros per night, or get a private room with good metro access for around 30 to 40 euros instead of paying for a luxury hotel. You could skip expensive cafes like Majestic and eat at smaller local places for around 7 to 10 euros per meal. Use the metro from the airport for 2 to 3 euros, rely mostly on walking, and skip optional extras like the tuk-tuk tour. If you travel this way, it becomes very realistic to enjoy most of the main sites for around 80 to 120 euros per day, which makes this a much smarter version of a Porto vacation without losing the heart of the experience. For me, this city feels more real than you expect, and that's exactly why it stayed with me. It isn't overly polished, and it doesn't feel manufactured for tourists, but that's what gives it its character. You still get the views, the history, the food, the riverfront atmosphere, and all the iconic places, but at the same time it feels authentic, layered, and a little unpredictable in the best possible way. If you're planning a trip here, I would definitely say it's worth visiting, even if you only have a short time. At the same time, I also think one day is enough to see the highlights, but not enough to fully experience everything the city has to offer. So if you can, I'd strongly recommend staying longer and exploring it at a slower pace. What really stood out to me is how different Porto feels from Lisbon. Lisbon feels bigger and faster, while Porto feels more intimate, personal, and a little easier to connect with. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more honest travel guides like this. I share real experiences, real costs, and practical tips so you know exactly what to expect before you go. And I'm curious, after watching this Porto Portugal travel vlog, do you think the city is actually worth visiting? Let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll try to help as much as I can. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.